All right, guys, so we are here with one of my aunts, and this is Aunt Frances, and we're going to be doing the interview with her today, talking about growing up on the farm with LD and Gardis and what that was like, so that you guys watching this, hopefully future generations will be able to see this and be able to put a name, a face, and now a voice with that firsthand accountability of growing up down in the Gritney area and around, and what Frances can remember and tell us about. We'll sit here and go through that today with her. So Frances, thank you for being with me today and doing this for our future generations. So that's what we're doing. So for the record, for the folks watching this now, what is your actual full name?
My full name was Frances Lily Crews.
Frances Lily Crews.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, and we got phones here going. There we go. So, do you know how Granny and I'll say, and I think I say this to you guys, when I refer to Granny and Granddaddy, I'm talking about LD and Gardis because they are my Granny and Granddaddy. But sometimes I'll say LD and Gardis, sometimes I'll say Granny and Granddaddy. But how did Granny and Granddaddy? Do you know how they came up with your name and named you?
Oh my gosh, I can tell you how they named me. Frances was a friend of theirs, Frances Sanders, if I understand it right, and then Lily was after my daddy's half sister.
Okay.
Lily. Let me see. Gee, I can't remember.
So LD had a half sister.
Yeah. His daddy was married before.
Okay.
He married my grandmother, Maud.
Gotcha.
Yeah, her name was
Maud Galding, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was Daddy's mother.
Gotcha.
And
And he had a half sister through that.
And her name was Lily. Yeah.
Okay.
And she married a Clemens from this area.
Okay. Yeah. So Frances came from a good friend of theirs, and Lily came from LD's half sister.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
Yeah. And I got that wrong. Not a Clemens. It was a Cooper. That she married.
Gotcha. Well, do you know how LD and Gardis met? Did you ever hear that from them about how they actually came together as a couple?
Probably at church. Cause see, her daddy was a preacher.
So
an Assembly of God preacher.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, Daddy was married before.
Right.
He married Will and Lizzie Curry's daughter, and her name was Irene. And they had one daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Her name was Ann. And Irene died from giving birth. Mm-hmm.
Giving birth to Ann.
Yeah. So Daddy was single then, I think, for about 3 years, maybe 2 years. No, 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And so then him and Mama got together and got married. They got married in December of 38, I believe it was, and I was born in 39.
So LD and Gardis got married in December of 1938, and then you were born in
September 24th. Let's get that right. 24th. Go from December the 16th to September the 24th.
So they had a good honeymoon, I guess.
Oh, well, yeah.
And
they probably had to walk back then. They didn't have no vehicles. They had horse and buggies,
Right,
back then.
Right. And but yeah, I was wondering. I've always wondered. Daddy Hewlin had always told me that they had met somewhere at a brush arbor or something.
I was fixing to say that brush arbor was just coming through my mind, And yeah, back then they had what they called brush arbors, and what it was for these kids that don't know what a brush arbor is, they put a like an arbor, and then they cut limbs from trees and all, and that was the cover. They covered that. And that's why it was called a brush arbor.
And that's where they would have. That's where they have church.
That's
where they'd have church, and that's where they'd do do I guess what do you call them? I forgot what you call them now, but basically where they would get together and have a big church sermon
Yeah.
during that time.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, that's what Daddy had said. They met at a brush arbor.
Oh, yeah.
Now LD probably knew about Gardis another way, and
Oh, he did.
and figured the only way he could get to her is to go to church.
And there was 3 or 4 other women that Mama had to contend with, and they told it that Mama probably was pregnant.
Yeah.
Well, hey, from December the 16th to September the 24th, Mama wasn't pregnant.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's cool. That's cool. Well, tell us and tell the folks watching a little bit about some of your earliest memories of, somewhere in that age of, because normally you can start remembering things at around 6 years old to 10 or 12. You can really, your mind can kind of keep some of that. What are some of your earliest memories of growing up there?
Well, this is not something that I could remember, but hearing Mama talk and Daddy talk, I gotta have a Kleenex.
Okay.
They're on the bar over here. But anyway, I need to get
Yeah. But some of those early memories that you.
Yeah. Like I said, Mom, thank you. Where was I at with that?
Some of those, that's okay. That's okay. Some of those early.
Like I said, it's something that I wasn't old enough to remember, but Mama and Daddy went to Sarasota, Florida. And he had a sister, Aunt Lily was down there. And then there was this lady that had a kind of a farm down there, and he worked with her. And not only that, but he worked at a cow, where they milk cows.
Yeah, like a dairy.
And, a dairy is where they, so I was down there, and Christine, I think, was born down there. She's the second one,
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's where we was at for a long time. And then when we came back up here, Daddy moved to Southport.
Okay.
Southport. So we lived down there for a while,
Okay.
But
so he was kind of running around, basically chasing the jobs, because that was in the late 1930s. And that was not long right after the Depression was kind of during and kind of slowly trying to ease back out of it.
Yeah.
So trying to find work and that type of stuff, you had to go where the work was at.
So he ended up, we left Southport and came back to Holmes County.
And you were probably, how old do you think you were when y'all came back?
Gosh, I was probably 4, 5.
So that was somewhere around 1944, 45.
Yeah, and what I'm saying now is things that Mama has told us told me over the years.
Right.
It's something that I didn't remember.
And then, but then when y'all got back up here, Daddy was telling me something about they'd moved into the old Bob King place, and. That was up around Highway 2, wasn't it?
No.
Or where was Bob King place?
No, the Bob King place is where, remember the block house down there on our way back to our place?
Yeah.
On 179 South? That pink house that the Boyds lived there. And
yeah.
Okay, and the house that we lived in was back just this side of that house, and that's the Bob King place. Now, before we moved there, we lived up off of Highway 2 on Rope and Pin Road.
And that's where Hewlin was born.
Yeah.
That's when he was born in 1942, right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then after we left there, then Daddy got the Bob King place.
Right.
And then from there he got the other place further down the road.
Yeah. That's where most all my memories come from.
Right.
Is down just north of the Gritney area there, and that's kind of where I think Daddy said that LD bought about 180 acres of land there, and so What's some of your memories of young memories growing up down at the what I would call the homestead of where
Okay.
we actually.
But I want to correct
Yeah.
something that you're
Yeah.
saying.
Okay, tell me, cause
I never did want to be known as being from Gritney.
gotcha.
So on all those roads that goes into Gritney, there was 2 dirt roads, and then they built that. Daddy was a commissioner, and he got the highway built through there. Okay, so there's a creek on each one of those roads, the 2 dirt roads and the 2 highway roads. And I told him, I said, that right there is where I cut off. I am not from Gritney. I'm north of Gritney, but I'm not from Gritney. Because Gritney back then, when I was growing up, a young teenager, Gritney was they was mean people in Gritney.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir, buddy.
Gotcha.
So that's the reason I didn't want to be called, I didn't want no part of Gritney.
So growing up out there on the farm, I'm assuming that when that land was he bought that land, a lot of it was in hardwood.
Woods, yeah.
Woods.
Yeah. And then he got a bulldozer in there, paid somebody to go in there and clear it and everything, and then he started planting cotton, and by this time, he had built that. There we go.
Yeah.
But anyway, after we left the Bob King house and moved down there, then we lived in a bungalow house. That house is still there.
That house is still there.
That house is still there.
God.
But when they built the highway, it was the house was so close to the highway till they had to set the house back.
Right.
So the house is set back. Actually, the house was sitting where the highway is now.
Yeah.
But they had to move it back,
And the reason and how they moved that house back then, guys, is houses were not built on concrete slabs back then. They were actually built up above the ground, and they were able to go in there and lift that house and basically just set it back. And so they were not on a concrete slab that couldn't be moved. So that's
right. Yeah.
And basically back then too, Frances can tell us about this, but I mean, you had wood floors in the house, and most of the time you could see the dirt underneath the
you
the
could.
house.
Yeah, and I got to tell this too. Whenever they would give us pills to take for worms, if you had worms,
Yeah.
in your body, whatever.
Right.
They'd give us them them huge red pills, jelly-looking pills, And what did some of us do? The house was the house was high enough that we could, that we could throw them up under the house.
And not take them.
So we didn't take them. Them blame things was hard to do anything with. So we just take them, but we didn't. We went a long time before we told Mom and Daddy about that.
Well, where in your earliest times, memory of it, where all did you wind up actually going to school?
Well, and there's a picture here. I'll show you.
Okay.
Started out at Isagora.
Isagora.
There was a 2-room schoolhouse there, and so that building is still there.
And we're going to get some pictures of that.
Okay,
I'm going to go by and get that so we can show you.
That building is still there, and it's the fellowship hall for the church now. And but anyway, we started out there.
Right.
And then from there we went to Bethlehem School.
Gotcha.
And I went there till the 9th grade, and me being the oldest of the 8, and Daddy got a bus driving job to Bonifay. And the superintendent wanted Daddy, he told him, he said, if I was you, I'd just take my kids out of Bethlehem and put them in Bonifay. So that's what he did. He took us all out and put us in Bonifay. Well, me and Christine, the first 2 of the children, we ended up graduating at Bonifay, and the rest of them left Bonifay and went back to Bethlehem, and they graduated at Bethlehem.
And you and Christine graduated in Bonifay.
Mm-hmm.
And what year did
59.
You graduated high school in Bonifay in
1959?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember anything about LD and Gardis's education? Do you remember much at all about?
All I know
what they
is
had?
what they told us. I think Mama might have went to the third or fourth, and the same with Daddy. They didn't. They just didn't get to go to school. They was poor,
Yeah.
and grew up on a farm, and it took. Daddy had to. And after him and Mama was married and started having kids, he had to work in order to make it with the children.
So from what you recall, they both probably had a third to fourth grade education.
That's what I understand. That's what they always told us.
Yeah.
But now Daddy could count money. He wasn't much on spelling. He was pretty good on spelling. And Mama, she couldn't write that good, but she, over the years after us kids got older and everything, then she learned to write better than what she did.
But LD could count some money.
Daddy could. I mean, you couldn't cheat him out of his money, even though he didn't go no further than the fourth or fifth grade. About the fourth grade, I think.
Yeah. Well, what was it? What were some of the memories you had of your high school days and?
Well,
and
it was
all
poor.
That you really, real poor.
It was pretty poor because we never got to, until me being the oldest, I didn't get to participate in any of the ball games or anything like that. We wasn't in anything like that. But now the boys, being the last three,
right?
They was. After, and then by this time I had gotten married and they were still in school, and so they got to play basketball,
Gotcha.
So, and see, I was already gone by then.
Yeah.
By this time I was 21 and married. But I stayed at home even when I had a job, me and Christine was still working, in fact, when we graduated, me and her and a girl named Juliet Shields, she graduated with us, and the three of us got a job there at the old post office in Bonifay, where the beauty shop is now, Main Street. Okay.
Yeah.
That was the post office at one time, and then it became available for somebody to rent. So there was Christo's 5 and 10 cent store out of Panama City, rented it, came up there, and they opened up a 5 and 10 cent store there. And so me and Christine and Juliet, we went in there and laid that store out. We learned to cut the glass, to make the shelves and everything. I mean, just the three of us. And I still remember the manager's name. Messick was his last name.
Messick.
Yes. Yeah. And but I forget how long we worked there. Well, in fact, they was training me to be a manager.
And that was right after you graduated high school?
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is before I knew Robert through his girlfriend. I mean, he dated one of my schoolmates, and I knew him through her, but we never contacted with one another. In fact, they were engaged, and they broke up, and he didn't come back to Bonifay. He was stationed at Tyndall.
Yeah.
And he didn't come back to Bonifay for 6 months. Well, so when he came back to Bonifay, and down there where the Piggly Wiggly is in Bonifay, there was a little drive-in place where they came out to the car and got your order.
Yeah.
So me and Christine, and by this time we'd bought a car, and so we were down there one night, and here comes Robert. And by this time, though, my car was loaded with girls. And and so here comes Robert and his friend Woody.
Yeah.
His last name was Woods, and they called him Woody. Yeah. He was older than Robert, but they were friends, But anyway, they came down there and came over there and was talking, and finally it got time for the girls to go, and we had an hour we had to get in too, so. But anyway, Robert stood around, he waited till all them girls left, and when the front seat, I was in the driver's seat, and when the front seat got empty, he comes over to the driver's side and gets in on the driver's side, and I slide over. So from then on, And he had bought him a 56 brand new Mercury. And him and Woody both then had a vehicle. And so they decided they didn't need both vehicles.
Yeah.
So he let his go back. And that's a long story. I don't think I'll get into that. But anyway, we ended up paying some on that because he didn't get, but they could never find us. You know, they had no address to find us to get the money, you know. They didn't, when they sold it, they didn't get the amount of money that they needed.
To pay it
so
off.
So when they finally found us, we ended up paying $5 a month. Because we didn't get, anyway, though, we got that all settled. But
so that's how you.
But he didn't have a car, so then he got to where if Woody couldn't come up here, and Woody started dating a girl from Bonifay, but when he couldn't come, then Robert would get out and thumb up here.
Hitchhike.
And I mean, he was coming, and I told him though that night. I said, and him and Woody drank beer, you know.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, don't come to my house drinking. I said, because if you do, Daddy won't let me go. And he wouldn't,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, yeah.
And so, so anyway, though, me and Daddy got into it one night. I was to meet him in Bonifay. He was going to make it to Bonifay, and I was to meet him in Bonifay. And Daddy didn't want me. He didn't want me to go. And I'm 21 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And I told, and they was building that highway by that time, and it had rained, and it had ruts in it like that, and we had that '58 Chevrolet, the light mauve, not mauve pink or whatever and white. And Daddy got mad with me, and he come in my bedroom, and he was fixing to slap me. He just done like this, and I could see stars, and he didn't even touch me. I could just see stars because he was fixing to hit me good, you know. Am I supposed to be telling this?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
So anyway, he goes and gets on my car. And son, he took off. He went up that road just to get it. I mean, just to get it. Well, he come back to the house. He asked Mom and Christine. Christine was mad. Ooh, she was mad. She would have flew into him. She said she would if he'd hit me. Well, I made up my mind while he was gone. If he don't let me go and pick Robert up, me knowing Robert was going to be down there, I said, if he don't let me go, I'm gone. I'm leaving home. I said, I am going to leave home. I'm 21 years old and I'm going, you know. Well, he come in the back door. Where's she at? He said, I just figured that since she was showing her ass, sorry, that wasn't no need of me showing mine. I thought to myself, boy, you done showed yours, you know, but you don't own up to that, you know. But anyway.
He let you go to Bonifay?
Yes, he told me, he said, go on. And I mean, you know, he didn't have to do all that.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm 21.
Yeah.
But I done made up my mind that I am leaving.
Yeah.
Because I knew I had somebody that would marry me. I mean, you know, so I was gone.
Yeah.
I didn't worry about it, you know.
Well, stepping back just a hair, and then we'll get back into you and Robert meeting and all that. But back when we lived, or you lived there, just outside of Gritney on the north side. Whenever we got that property, or LD and Gardis got that property and all, and it had to be cleaned up and all. From what I remember about Granny and Granddaddy was that he did the jobs I remember him doing was he pump wooded some, he worked in the log woods a lot, he farmed quite a bit. And then what I actually forgot was that he raised quite a bit of, not literally, or literally, he raised cane.
Oh, yeah.
For making syrup and stuff. And I had almost forgot about that because I was small enough that I actually remember him having a cane mill and us out there doing that. But what, you know, and I know you.
There was a lot of hard work at a cane mill. I mean, there was a lot of hard work. But now, Daddy made some of the best syrup that you would ever put in your mouth. There's some around here that makes syrup, and it's bitter. Right. Simply because they let the frost bite the cane. Daddy would never let the frost bite his cane. Because if he did, the syrup would be bitter. So what we had to do, we had to strip the cane, we had to top the cane, We had to cut the cane down. We had to carry the cane to the mill. And then we had to have somebody to feed the mill. And then over there where the juice went into the vat, and he had a long vat. I forget how long it was and how wide. Probably wide as this table, but it was long too. A lot of people have the big round pot for their juice.
Yeah.
And then there you got to have somebody to keep wood in under the vat.
Yeah, because back then, y'all, there wasn't any propane or natural gas or anything like that they were using to heat up these vats with all this cane juice. They were feeding wood underneath it, and you had to have somebody constantly keeping wood in there to keep that temperature up so that cane could work off.
And then they had to have somebody to get the stuff off the top of the, I can't even remember the name of it now, but you had to have somebody to
skim it off.
Skim a skimmer. They'd call them a skimmer.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd have to skim that off the juice, you know. And all this time that juice is getting hotter and hotter, and it keeps working itself down here. Once it gets like Daddy wanted it, the syrup, then you had to have somebody down there to draw up the syrup. And so I got good enough that he would let me draw up the syrup. And he'd put it in, back then we put it in tin buckets with a handle to it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gallon buckets.
Uh-huh.
And then he would load that up because he could get a better price for it. He'd load that up and carry it to Birmingham. So there was another guy that was from Holmes County, and he went up there, and Daddy was up there one time and with his, and this guy, you know, after so long a time, Daddy got sleepy and he went to sleep. Well, when he woke up, a lot of his cane syrup was missing. The man that was up there from Holmes County stole about 500 gallons of syrup from Daddy. That man's dead and gone. I mean, he's been dead and gone a long time. I can barely remember that man.
But growing up out there doing the farming, making the growing the cane and the syrup and hogs. I remember he had a lot of hogs at the time.
Yeah, and we killed our own hogs and made our own meat but you know, one good thing about it, he didn't have to hire too many people. Once us young'uns got big enough to work, every one of us had a job, you know.
Right.
And he would take a 55-gallon barrel, dig a hole, put that barrel in there like that, fill it up with water, put a fire around it, and let it get steaming hot. And he'd take that hog and he'd put one end in, pull it out and turn around and put the other end in and pull it out, and we'd all get there and pull them hairs off of that hog.
Yep, and scrape that hair off with a big butcher knife.
After it got so, you know, you got the most loose of it off of there. And then he would take hair on spots that didn't get enough of hot water on them. He'd take the hair off, you know, that we had scraped off and put on top of that, and then pour hot water on top of that, and it would come off.
Come off of it. So, there wasn't any going to the meat market in the IGA or the Piggly Wiggly or Walmart or whatever you guys have today. I don't know what it'll be when you're watching this, but back then it was everything was pretty much done at the house. And, you know, chickens, that's where you got your eggs for your chickens and stuff.
Mama, not only that, but that's where we got our chicken to eat. Mama would get a chicken and she'd take it and wring its neck. A lot of times she'd take it and tie it up on the clothesline by the feet, you know, and then she'd go out there and take a knife and cut its throat.
Yeah, when you're talking about the clothesline, and again, y'all watching this with the clothesline, they didn't have a dryer. No. They didn't have a washing machine. So the clothes were all washed by hand on a scrub board. And if it's 30 degrees or 20 degrees outside, you're still out there, you got to wash your clothes. And then you'd have a line in the backyard strung between two posts. And that's where you would hang your clothes up to let them dry, because you didn't have a washing machine and dryer. That's how you got your clothes.
Scott can tell this better than I can. But he's telling the truth.
I remember Granny Crews, Gardis not having a dryer. I mean, at my age, when I was born in 1968, so around 1972 to 75, when I was around her a lot, I mean, it was, you know, she was dragging me around while she was doing a lot of her work, and that part of that was hanging clothes on the dryer.
After me and Robert married, we bought Mama and Daddy, or Mama actually, the first washing machine she ever had.
And that was.
I was by this time I was probably 22 or 3 or somewhere, middle 20s.
So that was probably around 1960.
Yeah. Well, let's see. I don't know. Figure it out.
yeah, 65 to 68, somewhere along in there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think you answered one of my other questions. I was going to say, when did you actually leave home, and how that was. So that was somewhere you and Bob, after y'all started dating a little bit.
Yeah, I was out, and actually Robert by this time got him an old car. And we was out across the road over there. Daddy had a little spot there, you know, between the pond and the highway. And we was out there doing something to tomatoes. And Robert came. And he had brought my ring. And so he asked Daddy if it was, you know, he wanted to marry me, you know. So it was okay with Daddy then, you know. So anyway, we dated 2 months.
2 months.
And got married.
Man. And he was stationed at Tyndall during that time in the Air Force.
We started dating the first part of February, and we got married the 2nd of April.
Woo.
And we was married 53 years when he died.
53 years.
He died, in fact, yesterday was 11 years. The January the 8th of 2014.
Yeah, that was one thing I forgot to tell y'all. Today's January the 9th, 2025. So he died on January the 8th. Well, if you, I mean, we'll talk about some other stuff, but when you grew up under the guidance of LD and Gardis, how growing up under them do you think it helped you in life? You know,
oh my gosh, you know, if every parent this day and time was like my daddy was when I was growing up, there would not be, I don't think, there would not be as near, what do I need to say, trouble with teenagers nowadays, you know, it is if they had parents to bring them up like my daddy brought me up. I mean, Daddy was, he was rough, he was tough.
That's what I was going to ask you. What was I was going to ask you about LD and Gardis separately. What was LD like growing up? I mean, Daddy, Hewlin nicknamed him Minuteman was his nickname, what Daddy called him.
Yeah.
It had to be done now, now, not a minute later.
And then if he whipped you and you cried, you're going to cry.
Yeah.
If he whipped you, then then he'd tell you to shut up. Dry it up. Well, how are you going to do that when you're hurting from getting your butt?
Oh, Lord, yeah.
You know, he was. I mean, Daddy was good, and he got better in his older years. But, oh gosh, I'm telling you, and I didn't get around to saying this, but it didn't matter what we had to do on the farm. It was work. We picked cotton, and the day that I picked 100 pounds of cotton, I had to get 100 pounds every day after that, or get my tail spanked for not doing it. But you know, to me, it was something great that I had picked 100 pounds, because you know,
nobody else picked 100 pounds.
But you can't pick wet cotton.
Right.
And I always picked the cleanest cotton. Daddy always remarked about my cotton. He said, you won't find any leaves, dry leaves, green leaves, burrs, cotton burrs. He said, you won't find any, and he didn't. I didn't put it in my sack. Did not.
Wasn't no combine to pick
Oh
cotton.
Lord, no. And then in watermelons, 200 acres to plant. You had a nailed
Apron.
you know, and you put your seed in that, and you had a hoe, and you had to step 3 steps to plant a hill of, you know, and we had to, sometimes we planted them 3 times. Daddy tried to get them in the ground by the last of February, but he'd go back, he'd plant them this week and go back next week and plant on the other side of that hill in case a frost came and killed that first planting. If it killed them, then the next one was ready to come through, you know. So they was just working, and it didn't matter.
They're just constant.
Pulling corn, we pulled corn, we picked cotton, we planted watermelons. We picked up roots on new ground. Daddy loved to plant watermelons in new ground, and then he'd go find somebody that wanted their land cleared. Daddy'd pay for it to be cleared, and he'd plant watermelons.
And what new ground is, y'all, is again, whenever you've got, if you just could imagine a whole forest of hardwoods or trees and stuff, and you'd get that cleared out, so now you just got your ground there. Even if you got a bulldozer in there or whatever to help clean it up, there was still a lot of roots and limbs and stuff that had to be picked up, and the kids were the ones that were out there having to pick up those roots and tote them to a root pile and burn them. But then LD, he always said that ground would grow the best watermelons because of the nutrients that was in that ground where the other crops had not been grown. And so when we refer to new ground, that's what it's talking about.
Yeah. And there was something I was fixing to say about that.
But he would.
This time of the year, this is January of 2025.
Right.
And this time of the year, as cold as it is, we were out there picking up roots because he said he didn't want, when he planted his watermelons, if there was a root close by and you went back in there to hoe around them, the watermelons, and you hit a root, it was going to tear up the watermelon. So anyway, though, we had to pick up roots, and you could say something about being cold. He said, if you'll work hard enough,
you won't be cold.
You won't be cold.
Well, what was Granny Crews' Gardens? What was she like?
Mama was a good woman. She had to be a good woman. And she had a lot of work. Mama, oh Lord, Mama used to, when us kids was little and I got old enough to take care of the ones under me, then she was out there and she would plow. Daddy had, I believe it was a mule and a horse. And Mama would plow in behind him with one or the other, whichever, you know. And she plowed when she was pregnant.
Good gosh.
She
plowing behind a mule,
yes,
dragging a plow, and that little woman trying to keep that plow straight going down through the.
And then you know she had to, well, and like I said, once I got old enough, you know, well, I had to help take care of the kids. Then she cooked, you know, and she had all that to do, you know. And then she got up the next morning, she had to do breakfast, you know, and then she'd go to the field with Daddy. Come in and at lunchtime and fix a meal. She was she was definitely one of a kind. Yeah, she was, like I said, she was, and she stuck by Daddy with all of his drinking and everything. And she said that, you know, that if she couldn't live with him, there wasn't nobody else that's gonna live with him.
So we're gonna switch gears and go back to you and Robert. Now, so after you left home and married Robert, and he was in the Air Force, y'all traveled a little bit then. So where all were you stationed at when you were? Oh my
gosh, I didn't get to go anywhere. He was stationed at Tyndall.
Yeah.
And we lived down there until he was sent to which country did he go to first?
In Germany or?
Well, he was in the Army before I ever knew him. He served 3 years in the Army. Okay. And he was overseas in Germany all 3 years. So when he came back home to West Virginia, He was out 10 months, and he said, this life's not for me. So he joined the Air Force.
Gotcha.
And he was sent to Tyndall.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, like I said, we started dating, and then we got married, and then we lived in Panama City, Oak Avenue in Panama City, and then from there he went to.
I want to say he went to Korea or Thule, Greenland.
No, he didn't.
He didn't go to Greenland.
Mm-mm.
He went to Korea.
It was Korea. For a year, and then he came back, and he was sent to Gunner.
Gunner.
We were up there, and by this time we got a little boy.
Yeah.
Bobby was
born. Y'all were in Prattville, weren't you?
Yeah,
we lived in Prattville.
We had a trailer and we pulled it up there, and we ended up getting on Skyline. Near Skyline is a little small little place where there was 3 or 4 stores, But we got a pretty good size place to put the trailer. We didn't have no close people right real close to us,
Yeah.
But anyway, that's where we were at there, and then from there he was sent to. I can't remember the next place. Anyway.
But y'all wound up putting 20 years in the service, didn't he?
When I married him.
All right, so we had a battery go dead on us, so we're back in action for a minute. But where we were leaving out is we were talking about Frances and her husband Robert. We called him Bob. That they were stationed. One of the other places he was stationed was over in Turkey when he was in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. He was, the first one was, what did I say?
Tyndall. He was at Tyndall, and then Germany
Germany was in the Army before I knew him.
And then he was Tyndall, and
then he left and went to
Gunner Air Force Base in Alabama, and then from there was probably Turkey. Maybe.
Where was that other one that I told you a while ago? See, I done forgot that one. Anyway, yeah, he went to Turkey for a year and a half. I could have gone, but he said you would never make it over here. After he got over there, you had to wash your greens and bleach them and all that kind of stuff. He said you would never make it over here. So I said, I really don't care to go, So just get your 18 months done and come home,
And then when y'all got back to the States and all, when did y'all actually settle down back? You're actually across the road from LD and Gardas.
Yeah, but see, he ended up, his last tour, and he retired, was the Philippines. He was overseas 3 times when and so his last tour was the Philippines for 12 months.
Gotcha.
So when he came home, he retired.
Okay.
22 years.
22 years in the service.
Uh-huh.
So y'all moved back there across the street from.
Yeah. We were in Niceville, and then when he went to the Philippines, we pulled our trailer up there and parked it in behind Mom and Daddy's house until he retired. And then after he retired, then we got the property across the road from Mom and Daddy, and there's where we raised our family.
That's where you raised Bobby and Kim.
And Kim was born 4 years after Bobby was. So.
And then, so one thing that I think the folks that are watching this and generations down the road, now Frances, as far as work went, she wasn't scared of it, but she actually, cool thing that I remember is she was a bus driver for here in Holmes County, Florida, and she drove a bus. Now you drove a bus for how long?
I drove it for 40 years to Bethlehem, and Robert kept wanting me to retire, so I retired in 2012. Yeah, and so after I retired, then I was out like 2 years, and they needed substitutes. So Kip Jackson, the mechanic in Bonifay, bus mechanic, I called him one day because I talked to a girl that I went to school with. She was in Niceville, and she said I could probably go back to, and I said, do you think I have to take that CDL test again? She said, I don't think so. So I called Kip, And I asked him, I said, do you think I'll have to take that CDL test again? And he said, I don't know, but I'll check, and I'll get back with you. Well, it weren't no time before he called me back, and he said, come down here and get your license, because I didn't know it. I thought you could keep your CDL license, but you can't. If you don't use them, if you're not driving a bus or a 18-wheeler, they'll take your CDL license and give you back your operator's.
Gotcha.
So mine had been gone for about a year, my CDLs, and he said, come down here and get your license. He said, I'm fixing to put you to work. So I drove to, then I subbed for a year, and I had an old bus that didn't even have a heater on it, and we like froze to death, but we made it. But then, and not only that, but I got to back up and tell you, I drove so long, and they told me when I started driving that if whichever come first on a bus, 100,000 miles or 10 years a bus on the road, it was replaced. Well, guess what? I went through 5 brand new buses. My bus was the first bus, and I forgot what year it was, but my bus was the first bus that had seat belts on it. And they might as well have not put them on there and saved that money, because they told me the day I picked that bus up, they said, all you got to do is crank this bus, because I had speakers on there then. He said, all you got to do is crank this bus, tell the kids to buckle up. That's all you got to say. Well, the kids might buckle up and they might not. Yeah. I mean, I tried to stay in behind them, but it didn't do no good, because I could stop the bus and get up and walk back there, and a bunch of them wasn't buckled up.
Well, now that brings me back, and I hate to retract on that, but that's something. LD drove a school bus.
Oh yeah,
too.
Yeah.
So not only was he farming,
I mentioned that. I mentioned that.
He was he drove a bus. Frances drove a bus. Ricky, who we'll be interviewing later, the youngest boy, Ricky drove a bus, and so. But anyway, you put 40 years in plus.
Okay, after they hired me back to sub, they paid me a solid year sub pay. And so then I drove that year, and then I went back. They hired me the next year. So then I couldn't get not the superintendent, but the principals at those schools down there. I couldn't get them to back me if I had problems. They didn't. They were slow about backing me. In February, it was the middle of February. It was on a Friday, and it was payday. And at the time, me and Bobby was meeting me at the Waffle House. We on Fridays he would meet me at the Waffle House, and we'd eat breakfast down there, and then I'd come on home and go back. So I went down there that morning. It was on Friday, payday. What did I say the other one was? Friday, payday, and middle of February. So Bobby knew when I walked in Waffle House, he knew something was wrong with me. And he said, what's wrong, Mama? I said, today's my last day driving a school bus. I said, I am going to the house. I said, I can't get the principals to back me. And I said, I'm fed up. I said, I'm tired of training little ones how to get on the bus and sit down and behave. I said, it's time for me to go to the house. So I come to the house.
So how many total years do you think?
42 and a half.
42 and a half years driving a school bus to Bethlehem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, now those sub days with Bonifay. I had to drive to the bus. They wouldn't let. I was 10 miles from the bus.
Yeah.
I had to go from here over to the bus, and that was on the Dogwood Lakes Highway, John Marsh Road. There's where I parked the bus. They wouldn't let me bring it over here.
Bring it to the house.
Ricky kept telling me, he said, take it to the house. They don't say nothing. I said, no, if they tell me not to, I'm not going to do it. But now Kip Jackson, he'll tell you that I was the best bus driver that Holmes County's ever had. Right. Now, I'm not lying to you.
I know you and Buddy Ward was fighting to be who could have the most years in.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, though. I can't remember if he was still driving when I was driving to Bonifay or not, when I was subbing. Yeah. But I hated to leave because they needed me.
Yeah.
I mean, they had some of the mechanics was having to drive, some teachers was having to drive, and they told them, they said, you got to do better than that. You can't do that. You know, you can't let teachers and mechanics drive, you know. Yeah. So, but by golly, they did. Now they're still doing it. Yeah. I mean, they still need substitutes. But I hated to leave, and I left the Waffle House that morning, went right back straight and went in and told the transportation director at that time, she was a lady, and Kip. So I brought him in there and set him down and told him, I said, I hate to tell y'all, but this is my last day. I knew they had somebody else that could take my place at that time. Otherwise, I'd tried to finish out that year, but I was fed up. I had it. After 42 and a half years, I was ready to come to the house.
Well, I've got two more questions for you, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
The next to last question here is, tell me a little bit about your sister Marie, and what all you remember about Marie. Because I want to make sure that she's included in this, and y'all are going to be the voices for her, since she's not with us.
Marie was special. She was sweet. And we hated, you know, that happened to her. And so far that's the only one. But I kind of seem to think that Marie didn't have all the chores that the rest of us had to do. I mean, you know, she was kind of in the middle. She was the fourth one. Yeah, because Helen was the third and she was fourth. And see, there was two girls, a boy, a girl, two boys, a girl, and a boy. That's the way. Yeah. That's the way we came out.
Yeah. Well, Hewlin was telling me that he said what he remembered a lot about Marie was that she was always laughing and cutting up and carrying on type thing,
I want to say that she got a good husband, Larry Hewitt. He's still, till this day, he's still one of us. He's our brother-in-law.
Yeah. Yeah,
he is. And Marie, she done well, you know.
And she died at the age of
32.
32.
Mm-hmm. And had two kids. Kelly was the oldest. She was 6, and little Larry was 2.
Yeah.
And then Big Larry, he didn't wait around, you know. He needed, because he worked in Gainesville and they lived in Ocala, and he needed somebody, so he knew this. He knew Dina, and it wasn't long that they got married. You know, I think maybe Marie died in December, and I think they got married in, seems like it was August of the next year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she had a couple of kids.
She had she had one, and then her son was the oldest, and he had what was that disease that he had? And it's one that you don't live long.
Like muscular
dystrophy. I can't even say it. Dystrophy. Yeah. And like I said, they said, you know, that kids that had that, or anybody that had that, they didn't live long, which he didn't. And he passed away. And then she had a girl, Dee Dee. Mm-hmm.
And now Marie, she graduated school at Bethlehem.
Bethlehem, yeah.
Bethlehem.
Mm-hmm. She sure did. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make sure we include her, because I don't remember a lot about Aunt Marie. I just remember
she was sweet. She was, you know,
just
and
she was good-hearted.
Yeah, she was. Yeah. She was, like I said, she was the fourth one.
Mm-hmm. And anyway, last thing I was going to ask you is as we're talking to future generations of the Crews bloodline, if you will, anything you would want well, you already got some greats.
Oh, I have. I got 2 and fixing to have 3.
Greats now.
And we're hoping and praying this little girl, just because John Luke, bless his heart, little John Luke, he has begged for a sister. And I mean, I know it's already made, and I hope and pray to God it's a little girl. I really do.
But anyway, down the road, any of your greats down the road that is watching this, and hopefully they will, anything that you would want them to know, any of those future generations that are able to see this now?
Well, I don't know if we told my granddaddy on Mama's side, Mama's daddy. I don't think we told his name.
And Gardis Crews was a Barnes. Her last name, maiden name was Barnes.
Barnes, yeah.
Well, go ahead.
And her daddy was Jesse Monroe Barnes. And like I said earlier, he was a preacher. And buddy, I'm gonna tell you what, he was a good one. I mean, he was a good one.
And he was a.
Now his wife, my mama's mama, died. Mama was the oldest one left at home, and there was 4 or 5 under her. That once her mama died, then she had to take over and take care of.
So she would. So they were. Gardis had when her mother died at a young age.
Yeah, and the youngest one was 2 years old when her mama died.
And that was William.
No,
William.
That was Donnie Jean.
Donnie
and
Jean.
See, Donnie Jean has just passed within the last year. I forget what month it was,
Okay.
but he's yeah. But see, Mama had, like I said, Mama had to take over and raise. Of course, there was a couple of them. Like I said, there was Aunt Estelle, Betty Sue, Uncle Jesse. But Betty Sue was further down. There was Estelle, Jesse, Betty Sue, or Donnie. No, it wasn't Donnie. Donnie was the baby. He was 2 years old when she died. And then there was Barney, Betty Sue, and then Donnie. I think there was 5 that Mama had to take over after her mama died. She had to take over and help raise them. But see, Daddy, I think her and Daddy got married about 2 years after her mama died.
Right.
So then the next one took over.
How old was Gardis, you think, when she married LB?
You know what? I'm not sure.
Was she?
She
was younger than 20, wasn't she?
You know, that's something I can't even remember even talking about, really.
I'll look that up because I'm going to go by the cemetery. So
you can see there when she was born. Yeah.
So something you would want these future generations to know is that Gardis's father was I think he was a Pentecostal preacher.
He was, yeah. Well, the Assembly of God
Assembly of God.
Yeah, but back then they called him Holiness.
Holiness.
And I mean, he believed his wife wore long sleeve dresses down to her ankles, long hair. He was that kind of preacher. And y'all, I'm telling you, he was a good one.
Mm-hmm.
He was a good one.
Yeah.
Me and Christine, when we'd go to church and he was down there at Harris Chapel, you know, him and his grandchildren, Mama's and Daddy's children, poured the foundation for Harris Chapel Church.
It's still there today.
Yeah.
It's still
sure
there today.
Did. And they keep adding to it, you know. It was just a square church, you know, when Papa built it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Man.
So see, in my 85 years, I've been around. I mean, a good way. I mean, I've done a little bit of all the farming, you know. Milked a cow. There was out of us 8 children, there was only 2 that learned to milk a cow, and that was me and Clifton.
Huh.
And Lord, if it was raining and that cow wasn't under a shed, when I went out there to milk that cow, water just dripping, and I had to keep my bucket up there where the water wouldn't drip off of the cow into the milk.
Goodness. Well, that kind of helps and we're going to be doing all the interviews with the brothers and sisters, and so happy that y'all are still around that we can do this.
Yeah.
And I hope that somebody benefits from it, to get to see you, get to hear you, because like I said, the Ancestry.com and Cage Tommy's son has done a great job with the
Mm-hmm.
ancestry, tracing us back with those lineages. But that goes so far. But now they can actually hear you and hear what you had to say, and I'm thankful for that time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and at my age, 85, that's a long time, and I know there's a lot that I could have talked about if I could have remembered it.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
couple of things that came up that I couldn't remember, just like
Yeah.
the one we just talked about.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to point out to all the folks viewing that Gardis had a different type of skin, a different type of skin than most of the folks do today. But I wanted to show you, and hopefully see. I want to show them the skin that if you can see the type of skin that Frances had. Gardis had the exact same skin that she has.
And my son will tell you today that looking at my arms is just like looking at his grandma.
Exactly, and it's exactly like looking,
absolutely.
As I say, Granny Crews. That's exactly.
And
like
the dermatologist, when I'd go to the dermatologist down at Eglin Air Force Base, they'd want to know why was I in the sun. I said my daddy was a farmer, and I said we'd try to wear long sleeves. Mom would tell us we needed them, but I just had the type of skin that the sun was against me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's what it does to you. And then I'm taking, since I had that heart attack, August was a year ago, they put me on Plavix, which is a blood thinner, and every time I bump myself, this is what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all, I had one right here, and it's gone away. I pulled it up there, and it was that big around. And I've got places on my legs and my body. Whatever you bump, it's going to, if it don't break the skin, it's going to do this, stuff like this. But if it breaks the skin, then you got to worry about bleeding to death.
That's right.
You do.
Yeah, it is.
You do.
But yeah, I remember that, and as I was looking at your hands, I remember Granny Crews's looking just like that. I remember, with Granny, because when my mom and dad divorced when I was 6, and Granny Crews basically raised me, and so she was like my mom, and I remember just the things that we did, and like shelling peas on Friday night. Friday night we were watching 3 different shows. We were watching the Dukes of Hazzard, and we were watching Dallas, and then what was the one that came on after Dallas? There was one other one that came out like Fort Worth or something. Anyway, there was 3 shows. We'd sit there and watch those shows, and we'd shell peas, or we were doing whatever what was going on at that time. That's what she was doing at the end of the day after she had worked all day, and I'd be there helping her do that, and I'd look over there at her, and her head would be down like that, and I'd hear that snoring a little bit, and me being young, I'd poke her and I'd say, "Granny, get up," and she was like, she'd come up like that, and she was like, "I'm not asleep." She was like, "I just rested my eyes." And I said, "You need to go to bed."
I tell you what, I don't know how Mama made it. I really don't, and I think about her and Daddy a lot, because I've got some pictures of Daddy. And Mama and Daddy both were thin. I mean, they was working themselves to death because they had 8 youngins to support.
Yeah.
And it was just it was rough.
Rough times. But growing up there just right after that depression and all and everything. But anyway, well, thank you, Frances, for sharing that with us, and we're going to get this put together and make it available for the future folks to be able to look at and hopefully glean a little bit of information from their ancestors.
Well, I hope y'all enjoyed it. I've never done anything like this, but I hope I did all right.
Well, we caught her in the nick of time. She's 85 and she's still kicking, so we're glad.
But you know what though? I done fine. I was in the hospital to have 2 children. I had a miscarriage in between the 2, and so I just
Yeah, you made it.
What was it? Yeah, I made it. But I don't know. There was something else I was fixing to say. But when you get 85, you tend to forget a lot, and it'll happen to you when you're trying to tell it. You know. So please forgive me for all of that. And
all right. Well, thank you so much, and y'all stay tuned. We got more coming.